Section 31 of Greatheart. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Elaine Fleming. Greatheart by Ethel M. Dell. Cinderella's Prince. The early dusk of February was falling, together with a fine, drenching rain. The trees that overhung the muddy lane were beating their stark branches together, as though in despair over the general hopelessness of the outlook. The west wind that raced across the brown fields had the sharpness of snow in its train. "We shall catch it before we've done," said Bathurst to his hunter. Rupert, the hunter, a dapple gray with powerful hindquarters, cocked a knowing ear in a fashion that Dinah always described as his smile. It had not been a good day for either of them. The meet had been at a considerable distance. There had been no run worth mentioning, and now that it was over, they were returning, thoroughly tired, from the kennels. Bathurst's pink coat clung to him like a sack, all streaked and darkened with rain. It had weathered a good many storms in its time, as its many varieties of tint testified, but despite this fact, its wearer never failed to look a sportsman and a gentleman. There was nothing of the vagabond about Bathurst, but he had the vagabond's facility for making himself at home wherever he went. He was never at a loss, never embarrassed, never affronted. He took life easily, as he himself put it, and on the whole he found it good. Riding home at a jog-trot in that driving rain, with the prospect of having to feed and rub down Rupert at the end of it before he could attend to his own needs, was not a particularly entrancing prospect. But he faced it philosophically. After today, the little girl would be at home, and she could do it for him again. She loved to wait on him hand and foot, and it really was a pleasure to let her. He whistled cheerily to himself as he wended his leisurely way through the dripping lane that made the shortest cut to his home. It would be nice to have the little girl home again. Lydia was all very well, a good wife, as wives went, but there was no doubt about it that Dinah's presence made a considerable difference to his comfort. The child was quick to forestall his wants. He sometimes thought that she was even more useful to him than a valet would have been. He had missed her more than he would have dreamed possible. Lydia had missed her too. He was sure of that. She had been peculiarly short of temper lately, not that he ever took much notice. He was too used to her tantrums for that. But it certainly was more comfortable when Dinah was at home to bear the brunt of them. Yes, on the whole, he was quite pleased that the little girl was coming back. It would make a difference to him in many ways. He wondered what time she would arrive. He had known, but he had forgotten. He believed it was to be some time in the evening. Her grand friends had arranged to stay at Great Mallows, 3 miles away for the night, and one of them, the maid probably, was to bring Dinah home. He had smiled over this arrangement, and Lydia had openly scoffed at it, as if a girl of Dinah's age were not capable of traveling alone. But then, of course, she had been ill, very ill according to all accounts, and it was quite decent to them to bestow so much care upon her. He fell to wondering if the child had got spoilt at all during her long absence from home and the harsh discipline thereof. If so, there was a hard time before her, for Lydia was never one to stand any nonsense. She had always been hard on her firstborn, unreasonably hard, he sometimes thought, though it was not his business to interfere. The task of chastising the daughter of the family was surely the mother's exclusive prerogative, and certainly Lydia had carried it out very thoroughly. And if at times he thought her over-severe, he could not deny that the result achieved was eminently satisfactory. Dinah was always docile and active in his service, altogether a very good child, and this was presumably due to her mother's training. No, on the whole, he had not much fault to find with either of them. Doubtless, Lydia understood her own sex best. He was nearing the end of the long lane. It terminated close to his home. Rupert quickened his pace. They were both splashed with mud from shoulder to heel. They had both had more than enough of the wet and the slush. "That's right, Rupert, my boy," the man murmured. "Finish in style." They came out from beneath the overarching trees, emerging upon the high road that led from the Great Mallows to Perrythorpe. The hoot of a motor horn caused Rupert to prick his ears, and his master reined him back as two great, shining headlights appeared round a curve. They drew swiftly near, flashed past, and were gone, meteor-like, into the gloom. Whose car was that, I wonder? Mused Bathurst. The de Vignes's? It didn't look like one of the court cars. But the old bird is always buying something new, lucky devil. The thought of the colonel renewed his thoughts of Dinah. Certain hints the former had dropped had made him wonder a little if the child were always as demure as she seemed. Not that Colonel de Vignes had actually found fault with her. He was plainly fond of her. But he had not spoken as if Dinah had effaced herself as completely abroad as she did at home. Oh yes, the little baggage enjoyed herself, was as gay as a lark, till she got ill, he had said. You may find her something of a handful when she gets back, Bathurst. She's stretched her wings a bit since she left you. Bathurst shrugged his shoulders with the comforting reflection that he would not have the trouble of dealing with her. If she had been giddy, after all, it was but natural. Her mother had not been particularly steady in the days of her wild youth, and anyhow, he was sure her mother would speedily break her in again. She had a will of iron before, which Dinah was always forced to bend. He rode on along the high road. It was not more than half a mile farther to his home on the outskirts of the village. Somewhere in the gloom ahead of him, church bells were pealing. It was practice night, he remembered. Dinah loved the sound of the bells. She would feel that they were ringing in her honor. Funny little Dinah. The child was full of fancies of that sort. Just as well, perhaps, for it was the only form of amusement that ever came into her home life. The gay peal turned into a deafening clashing as at length he neared his home. The old church stood only a stone's throw further on. They were ringing the joy bells with a vengeance, and then very suddenly he caught sight of the tail lamp of a car close to his own gate. Dinah had returned then. They had actually chartered that car to convey her from Great Mallows. He pursed his lips to a whistle. The little girl had been in clover indeed. She certainly won't think much of the home crusts after this, he murmured to himself. He walked Rupert round to the tumble-down stable and dismounted. For the next quarter of an hour he was busy over the animal. He thought it a little strange that Dinah did not spy the stable lamp from the kitchen and come dancing out to greet him. He also wondered why the car lingered so long. It looked as if someone other than the maid had accompanied her and were staying to tea. He never took tea after a day's hunting. Hot whiskey and water and a bath formed his customary program, and then a tasty supper and bed. He supposed on this occasion that he would have to go in and show himself, though he was certainly not fit to be seen. Reluctantly, he pulled the bedraggled pink coat on again. After all, it did not greatly matter. Hunting was its own excuse. No sportsman ever returned in the apple pie order in which he started. Carelessly, he sauntered in by way of the back premises, and was instantly struck by the sound of a man's voice. Well-bred, with a slightly haughty intonation, speaking in one of the front rooms of the little house. Dinah seemed to think that she could not keep it until tomorrow, it said, with an easy assurance. So I thought I had better come along with her tonight and get it over. The words reached Bathurst as he arrived in the small square hall, and he stopped dead. Hello, hello, he murmured softly to himself. And then came his wife's voice, a harsh, determined voice. Do I understand that you wish to marry my daughter? That's the idea, came the suave reply. You don't know me, of course, but I think I can satisfy you that I am not an undesirable party. My family is considered fairly respectable, as old families go. I am the 9th baronet in direct succession, and I have a very fair amount of worldly goods to offer my wife. Mrs. Bathurst broke in upon him, a tremor of eagerness in her hard voice. If that is the case, of course I have no objection, she said. Dinah won't do any better for herself than that. It seems to me that she will have the best of the bargain. But that is your affair. She's full young. I don't suppose you want to marry her yet, do you? I'd marry her tonight if I could, said Sir Eustace, with his careless laugh. But Mrs. Bathurst did not laugh with him. We'll have the banns published and everything done proper, she said. Hasty marriages, as often as not, aren't regular. Here, Dinah, don't stand there listening. Go and see if the kettle boils. It was at this point that Bathurst deemed that the moment had arrived to present himself. He entered, almost running into Dinah, about to hurry out. "Hello," he said. "Hello," and taking her by the shoulders, kissed her. She clung to him for a moment, her sweet face burning. "Oh, Dad," she murmured in confusion. "Oh, Dad." With his arm about her, he turned her back into the room. "You come back and introduce me to your new friend," he said. "I've got to thank him, you know, for taking such care of you." She yielded, but not very willingly. She was painfully embarrassed, almost incoherent, as she obeyed Bathurst's behest. This is Dad," she murmured. Sir Eustace came forward with his leisurely air of confidence. His great bulk seemed to fill the low room. He looked even more magnificent than usual. "Ah, sir, you have just come in from hunting," he said. "I hope I don't intrude. It's a beastly wet evening. I should think you're not sorry to get in." Mrs. Bathurst, tall, bony, angular, with harsh gypsy features that were still in a fashion boldly handsome, broke in upon her husband's answering greeting. "Ronald, this gentleman tells me he wants to marry Dinah. It is very sudden, but these things often are. You will give your consent, of course. I have already given mine." "Easy, easy," laughed Bathurst. "Why exceed the speed limit in this reckless fashion? You are Sir Eustace Studley? I am very pleased to meet you." He held out his hand to Sir Eustace and gave him the grasp of good fellowship. It seemed to Dinah that the very atmosphere changed magically with the coming of her father. No difficult situation ever dismayed him. He and Sir Eustace were not dissimilar in this respect. Whatever the circumstances, they both knew how to hold their own with absolute ease. It was a faculty which she would have given much to possess. Sir Eustace was laughing in his careless, well-bred way. "It's rather a shame to spring this matter on you like this," he said. "I ought to have waited to ask your consent to the engagement, but I am afraid I am not a very patient person, and I wanted to make sure of your daughter before we parted. We are staying at Great Mallows, at the Royal Stag. May I come over tomorrow and put things on a more business-like footing?" "Oh, don't hurry away," said Bathurst easily. "Sit down and have some tea with us. It is something of a surprise, certainly, but a very agreeable one. Lydia, what about tea? Or perhaps you prefer a whiskey and soda?" "Tea, thanks," said Sir Eustace, and seated himself with his superb air of complete assurance. Mrs. Bathurst turned upon her daughter. "Dinah, how many more times am I to tell you to go and see if the kettle boils?" Dinah started, as one rudely awakened from an entrancing dream. "I am sorry," she murmured in confusion. "I forgot." She fled from the room with the words, and her mother, with dark brows drawn, looked after her for a moment, then sat down facing Sir Eustace. "I should like to know," she said aggressively, "what you are prepared to do for her." Sir Eustace smiled in his aloof, slightly supercilious fashion. He had been more or less prepared for Dinah's mother, but the temptation to address her as "my good woman" was almost more than he could withstand. "Will you not allow me," he said, icily courteous, "to settle this important matter with Mr. Bathurst tomorrow? He will then be in a position to explain it to you?" Mrs. Bathurst made a movement of fierce impatience. She had been put in her place by this stranger, and furiously she resented it. But the man was a baronet, and a marvelous catch for a son-in-law, and she did not dare to put her resentment into words. She got up, therefore, and flounced angrily to the door. Sir Eustace arose without haste, and with a stretch of his long arm, opened it for her. She flung him a glance, half hostile, half awed, as she went through. She had a malignant hatred for the upper class, despite the fact that her own husband was a member thereof, and yet she held it in an unwilling respect. Sir Eustace's nonchalantly administered snub was far harder to bear than any open rudeness from a man of her own standing would have been. Fiercely indignant, she entered the kitchen, and caught Dinah peeping at herself in the shiny surface of the warming pan after having removed her hat. "Ah, that's your game, my girl, is it?" she said. "You've come back the grand lady, have you? You've no further use for your mother. I dare say she may work her fingers to the bone for all you care, or ever will care again." Dinah whizzed round, scarlet and crestfallen. "Oh, Mother, how you startled me. I only wanted to see if my hair was tidy." "And that's one of your lies," said Mrs. Bathurst with a heavy hand on her shoulder. "They've taught you how to juggle the truth, that's plain. Oh yes, Lady Studley that is to be. You've learnt a lot since you've been away. I can see. Learnt to despise your mother? I'll lay a wager, but I'll show you she's not to be despised by a prinking mix like you. What did I send you in here for, eh? To see to the kettle, faltered Dinah, shrinking before the stern regard of the black eyes that so mercilessly held her own. And there it is, ready to boil over, and you haven't touched it. You worthless little hussy, you. Take that, and dare to disobey me again. She dealt the girl a blow with her open hand as she spoke, a swinging, pitiless blow on the cheek, and pushed her fiercely from her. Dinah reeled momentarily. The sudden violence of the attack bewildered her. Actually, she had almost forgotten how dreadful her mother could be. Then, recovering herself, she went to the fire and stooped over it, without a word. She had a burning sensation of the throat, and she was on the verge of passionate tears. The memory of Isabel's parting embrace, the tender drawing of her arms only a brief half-hour before, made this homecoming almost intolerable. "What's that thing you're wearing?" demanded Mrs. Bathurst abruptly. Dinah lifted the kettle and turned. "It is a fur-lined coat that he bought for me in Paris." "Then take it off," commanded Mrs. Bathurst. "And don't you wear it again until I give you leave. How dare you accept presents from the man before I've even seen him?" "I couldn't help it," murmured Dinah, as she slipped off the luxurious garment that Isabel had chosen for her. "Couldn't help it?" Bitterly, Mrs. Bathurst echoed the words. "You'll say you couldn't help him falling in love with you next, as if you didn't set out to catch him, you little artful brown-faced monkey. Oh, I always knew you were crafty, for all your simple ways. Mind, I don't say you haven't done well for yourself. You have, a deal better than you deserve. But don't ever say you couldn't help it to me again, for if you do, I'll trounce you for it. Do you hear? None of your coy airs for me. I won't put up with them. You'll behave yourself as long as you're in this house, or I'll know the reason why." To all of which Dinah listened in set silence, telling herself with desperate insistence that it would not be for long. Sir Eustace did not mean to be kept waiting, and he would deliver her finally and for all time. She did not know exactly why her mother was angry. She supposed she resented the idea of losing her slave. There seemed no other possible reason. For love, for her, she had none. Dinah knew, but too cruelly well, that she had been naught but an unwelcome burden from the very earliest days of her existence. Till she met Isabel, she had never known what real mother-love could be. She wondered if her fiancé would notice the red mark on her cheek when she carried in the teapot, but he was holding a careless conversation with her father, and only gave her a glance and a smile. During the meal that followed, he scarcely addressed her or so much as looked her way. He treated her mother with a freezing aloofness that made her tremble inwardly. She wondered how he dared. When at length he rose to go, however, his attention returned to Dinah. He laid a dominating hand upon her shoulder. "Are you coming to see me off?" She glanced at her mother in involuntary appeal, but failed to catch her eye. Silently she turned to the door. He took leave of her parents with the indifference of one accustomed to popularity. "I shall be round in the morning," he said to her father. "About 12? That'll suit me very well, unless I wait till the afternoon and bring my sister. I know she hopes to come over if she is well enough. That is, of course, if you don't object to an informal call." He spoke as if in his opinion the very fact of its informality conferred a favor, and again Dinah trembled lest her mother should break forth into open rudeness. But to her amazement, Mrs. Bathurst seemed somewhat overawed by the princely stranger. She even smiled in a grim way as she said, "I will be at home to her." Sir Eustace made her a ceremonious bow and went out, sweeping Dinah along with him. He closed the door with a decision there was no mistaking, and the next moment he had her in his arms. "You poor little frightened mouse," he said. No wonder you never knew before what life, real life, could be." She clung to him with all her strength, burying her face in the fur collar of his coat. "Oh, do marry me quick, quick, quick," she besought him in a muffled whisper, "and take me away." He gathered her close in his arms, so close that she trembled again. Her nerves were all on edge that night. "If they won't let me have you in a month from now," he said in a voice that quivered slightly, "I swear I'll run away with you." There was no echo of humor in his words, though she tried to laugh at them, and ever he pressed her closer and closer to his heart, till panting she had to lift her face, and then he kissed her in his passionate, compelling way, holding her shy lips with his own till he actually forced them to respond. She felt as if his love burned her, but even so, she dared not shrink from it. There was so much at stake. Her mother's lack of love was infinitely harder to endure. And so she bore the fierce flame of his passion unflinching, even though her spirit clamored wildly to be free, choosing rather to be consumed by it than left a beaten slave in her house of bondage. His kisses waked in her much more of fear than rapture. That untamed desire of his frightened her to the very depths of her being, but yet it was infinitely preferable to the haughty indifference with which he regarded all the rest of the world. It meant that he would not let her go, and that, in itself, was comfort unspeakable to Dinah. He meant to have her at any price, and she was very badly in need of deliverance, even though she might have to pay for it, and pay heavily. It was at this point, actually while his fiery kiss was scorching her lips, that a very strange thought crept all unawares into her consciousness. If she ever needed help, if she ever needed escape, she had a friend to whom she could turn, a staunch and capable friend who would never fail her. She was sure that Scott would find a way to ease the burden if it became too heavy. Her faith in him, his wisdom, his strength, was unbounded, and he helped everyone. The valiant servant Greatheart, protector of the helpless, sustainer of the vanquished. When her lover was gone at last, she closed the door and leaned against it, feeling weak in every fibre. Bathurst, coming out a few moments later, was struck by her spent look. "Well, Dinah, lass," he said lightly, "you look as if it had cost something of an effort to land your catch, but he's a mighty fine one, I will say that for him." She went to him, twining her arm in his, forcing herself to smile. "Oh, Dad," she said, "he is fine, isn't he?" But she uttered the words almost in spite of herself. "You should see his brother. You should see Scott." "What? Is he finer still?" laughed Bathurst, pinching her cheek. "Have you got the whole family at your feet, you little baggage?" She flushed very deeply. Oh no, I didn't mean that. Scott is not a bit like that. He is. And there she broke off, for who could hope to convey any faithful impression of this good friend of hers? There were no words that could adequately describe him. With a little sigh she turned from the subject. "I'm glad you like Eustace," she said shyly. Bathurst laughed a little, then bent unexpectedly and kissed her. "It's a case of Cinderella and the prince," he said lightly. "But the luck isn't all on Cinderella's side, I'm thinking." She clung to him eagerly. "Oh, Daddy, thank you. Do you know, it's funny, Scott used to call me Cinderella." Bathurst crooked his brows quizzically. "How original of him. This Scott seems to be quite a wonderful person. And what was your pet name for him, I wonder, eh? Sly Boots?" She laughed in evident embarrassment. There was something implied in her father's tone that made her curiously reluctant to discuss her hero. And yet, in justification of the man himself, she felt she must say something. "His brother and sister call him Stumpy," she said, "because he is little and he limps. But her face was as red as the hunting coat against which it nestled. "I called him Mr. Greatheart. He is just like that." Mr. Bathurst laughed again, tweaking her ear. "Altogether an extraordinary family," he commented. "I must meet this Mr. Stumpy Greatheart. Now, suppose you run upstairs and turn on the hot water, and when you've done that, you can take my boots down to the kitchen to dry. And mind you don't fall foul of your mother, for she strikes me as being a bit on the ramp tonight." He kissed her again, and she clung to him very fast for a moment or two, tasting in that casual, kindly remembrance of all the home joy she had ever known. Then, hearing her mother's step, she swiftly and guiltily disengaged herself and fled up the stairs like a startled bird. As she prepared his bath for him, the wayward thought came to her that if only he and she lived alone together, she would never have wanted to get married at all, even for the delight of being Lady Studley instead of poor little Dinah Bathurst.